Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is David Winterfeldt. This is automated provisioning of Spring apps to EC2 and VMware. I'm a staff engineer at VMware. I am originally tech lead on the VMware vFabric Application Director project, and I'm now lead architect. I've been developing for over 20 years, and I've been doing Java for over 14, and I also run the website Spring by Example.
Hi, my name is Brian Dussault. I'm also a staff engineer at VMware on the vFabric commercial team. I've been in the industry for about 14 years, working in IT and R&D roles, and also I'm the lead architect of the SpringOne reference application.
All right, these are our presentation goals. I'll be giving a general overview of Application Director just so you can understand the concepts, and we'll be using that to deploy our Spring applications. And then I'll be deploying the Spring Contact app. All the source code for that, we have URLs at the end, is available on the Spring by Example GitHub repository. So we'll start with an in-memory database, and we'll deploy that to vCloud and EC2. And then we'll take that and we'll iterate on that version and create a new one. And we'll add vPostgres and have an external database. And we'll configure the Spring profile to switch from the in-memory one to the Postgres one. And we'll also create a properties file for the new JDBC URL. And then we'll add an Apache server for static content serving from a JavaScript application, and also to proxy TC server. Then we'll have we'll update one of the contact apps that we deployed, and we'll also do scale out on it, and that's on a cluster node on TC server. And then Brian's going to go over the SpringOne application and give a general overview for configuration, and I'm trying to highlight some things that I have in my presentation. And then we'll try and leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So this is a quote from Paul Maritz. He's the former CEO of VMware. It's cloud is about how you do computing, not where you do computing. So I actually thought that was sort of good for the talk. We're not really interested where we're doing it. It's the benefits we get out of it. Why do we want to be in the cloud? And you know, what do we get as a developer by moving our apps there? And I'm sure a lot of people know, so this will just be short. But some key points, and there are a lot of them, but I listed agility, cost savings, virtualization, multi-tenancy, scalability, elasticity, and performance is some of the really big ones. And I think Application Director can help you achieve some of these more easily. Here's some cloud options. There's also quite a number of these acronyms and buzzwords. These ones are a little more relevant to the specific talk. So we have PaaS, SaaS, and IaaS. So PaaS is Platform as a Service, and that's well-defined computing platforms for hosted services, and some examples of that are Google App Engine and VMware's Cloud Foundry. And that's a well-defined environment that gives you a lot of these cloud capabilities if you follow their guidelines for developing your apps. And then SaaS is software as a service, so that's on-demand hosted services. They handle everything for you, and you can just sign up and register and not worry about anything. And Google Documents Enterprise version is one example of this. And then the final one is infrastructure as a service, and that's basically provisioning on demand for VMs and your infrastructure. So a couple examples of these are Rackspace, Amazon EC2, Bluelock, and VMware vCloud. And Bluelock actually runs vCloud behind the scenes. Okay, so a few issues in this area. We have, you can get into vendor lock-in. Everyone has different APIs. There are some abstraction layers that people have worked on to try and abstract things, and you certainly can use those. Another issue is repeatable deployments. You really want to have consistency and be able to keep deploying things again. Also, especially, you have different environments like dev, QA, and production, and you really want that repeatability also extend to that. So you certainly can script all this yourself and try and get that repeatability, but the more work you put into this, without having an abstraction layer of some sort, you enforce the vendor lock-in aspect, which is, means it'll be much harder for you to switch and you'll lose your work. And another critical issue is around updates. It's not just enough to get your application deployed, you really need to be able to manage it once it's out there. So you'll need to do different updates on configuration, iterating your apps, patches, etc. So some solutions that Application Director does help provide, but you really want like a cloud agnostic application and service modeling. So you abstract your application modeling from your deployment environment and where you want to deploy to cloud providers. So another option is having profiles that customize deployments for each environment. And so that's basically encapsulating this repeatable part. And so like you could have a profile for dev, QA, and production, and it's just a model so that you can save that and then have a repeatable deployment based off of that to different environments. And then finally, you do want to be able to apply application changes to existing deployments, so that's the update aspect. And you want to be able to update your application binaries, configuration files, and you also want to be able to change the size of a clustered node. So just to give in general the Application Director overall product goals, we want to have an open architecture. We want to be open, flexible, and extensible. We want to enable the application lifecycle. So we want to try and fit in with what people typically do for application development and help facilitate that process. Another aspect is model-driven management. We want to understand the application model. We want to enable dev and ops teams to collaborate on the model. That's part of that logical abstraction of your application. And then a final thing is providing a cloud abstraction layer. So using that model, you can model once and deploy anywhere. And then also leverage advanced features of each cloud provider when you do actually go to deploy. So I just want to highlight a few features from Application Director's upcoming release in Q4 for the 5.0 release. And then we are going to get into just some keywords and concepts. And I think a lot of this will make sense. We're going to do hands-on demos, putting apps together. Oops. So the cloud abstraction layer that we have, it currently will support vCloud and Amazon EC2 in the upcoming release. Supported operating systems, or Linux and Windows. There's a pluggable scripting engine. On Linux we support Bash, and from the Bash shell you can kick off Ruby or Python or whatever scripting language is available on your VM. And then on Windows we support Batch and PowerShell, and the same thing there, whatever other scripting languages you have, you can kick them off at this point from your PowerShell if you wanted to. Then we have a logical abstraction of applications using blueprints. Next few slides we'll start going over those concepts, but that's part of that abstraction layer between your app and the cloud provider. And there's also a property framework. This will probably make a little more sense when you see it also, but there's a layered properties. So when you have a service like TC server and you have the blueprint, which is your logical abstraction of your application, and a deployment profile, which is how you're deploying your app and specifics around that, it gives you a layered approach to being able to override configurations, and we'll do some of that during the deployments. And then we also have updates and scale out, and we don't have scale in the upcoming release. This is a general relationship of some of the concepts, and I'm going to go through each section one by one. So the cloud provider relationships, cloud provider in Application Director terminology represents vCloud and EC2, and the deployment environment uses a cloud provider, and that represents the physical location within the cloud where you specifically want to deploy. In the application relationships, the application just groups together application versions. So just as you normally would have a release with multiple versions, you just give an application name and you can group these versions together. The application version contains primarily the blueprint and a deployment profile. And the blueprint's application topology, and it's composed of template services and application components. And that's your logical abstraction of your app. Now within the blueprint, the items I mentioned, an application component represents things like wars, ears, executables, scripts, and SQL scripts, and some other items. And then services are from a catalog, and they're just software services like Apache and TC Server and things like that, so it's an encapsulation of those items. And then templates are VM templates, and you have to at least have an OS set up on one, and you can optionally also have services predefined on them already and have that modeled. And then there's two different types. The logical template is what goes on the blueprint, and the physical template is what you'll map to in your deployment profile as you actually go to deploy an actual deployment instance. So deployment relationships, a deployment's a specific instance of a deployed application version, and you would choose a deployment profile to do that deployment. And let's see, so in the deployment profile you'd pick a specific deployment environment which also has a cloud provider associated with it. And then the other big item in the deployment profile is your execution plan. That's a concrete representation of the blueprint's logical abstraction. So that's a step-by-step plan for executing all the scripts on the nodes and in what order. And we'll see that in the walkthrough. Here's just some general terminology mappings. I'm not going to go through all of them unless people have questions, but like cloud provider here, that's the application director term, and in vCloud it's the org, and in EC2 it's the region. And a deployment environment represents in vCloud the VDC, the virtual data center, and in Amazon it represents the VPC, the virtual private cloud, plus the availability zone. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm going to jump into the demo. So we'll be deploying the Spring Contact application with the in-memory DB on TC server. So I'll just log into the application. So our default landing page, you can see all the different applications available. I'm going to go ahead, So I'll call this contact SpringOne, and I'll just go ahead and click on save. Then you need to create a new version. And 1.0 is fine, and I'll give it a description, and we'll call it in-memory DB so we know this version's with that. Now we just need to create a blueprint. So as I mentioned, this is the logical abstraction of the application. So on the left you have your logical templates you can grab. You can have, with software services if you want, like MySQL, Gemfire, and things like that. In our case, we're just going to grab a plain CentOS 5.6 32-bit template, and this is also called a node on the blueprint. I'm going to call this Contact App. And you see here, if you wanted to, you could change the default CPUs in memory at this point if you wanted to. And also there's a NIC setting, which is a logical network abstraction. So the defaults are fine for this, but we'll see in the Apache example, I'll show doing some network segregation, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I'm going to drop TC server 2.1. I'm just going to show the properties here. So there's a column here, and the plug and the socket represent a feature called autobind. And then this webapp stir is an example of that. So the plug indicates that it's exposed. So this webapp stir is available for consumption from a consume property, and just there's a servlet container and dir is just string-based meta tags to associate information. So if there's a consume that also has those values, when you'd either drop items on or connect them through our dependencies, which you'll see in the examples, it'll auto-connect values. So I'm mentioning this because when we take our var application component and drop it on, we're going to see that 3 properties were set via autobind. Now I'm just going to rename that quickly to contact webapp. And we'll see here that the web app stir, as well as these 2 other ones, were automatically connected, and this is the consume type. So self refers to a reference to another property on your node, and then we're referring to the vFabric TC server service and its web app stir property. So in this case, it's, the properties are named the same. So I just need to set so this is the context, and it's a string-based property. That's the web app context path, and I'm going to call it contact. That's the name of my app. And I'll just mention briefly, but you can check off whether or not it's required when you actually go to deploy it, and you'll get validation around it. Secure, it'll make it more into a password field, and you'll get encryption and things on the back end, so it's not readable. And also, this is whether or not you can override it during deployment time. Yes? Self refers to the node that you're on. So if the gray box is the node. So the logical template is equivalent to the node. They're referred to both ways on the blueprint, more typically as a node, or if it's clustered, it'd be a node array or a clustered node. You're welcome. Alright, so I'm getting a URL here for my web app location. You could store this in a repository or Maven or whatever makes sense, or in this case it's just behind Apache. So this content type, as opposed to a string, this will actually application director will download any content type URL directly to each VM for you. So when you actually reference $var file in your script, you're going to already have a local reference. Yes, please.
What's the process for various steps of authentication?
So right now there's no built-in authentication for this. I think we may build that out more in the future. You certainly, if you wanted to, within your script, you could make this a string type, and then you could have some secure properties around passwords or other things like that, and then you could get it yourself. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so in this case, so when you just drag and drop, because of the autobind feature, it connected some of the default values you needed, and we just had to supply the web app context and the WAR file. So at this point, I can click on deploy. And here's where we create a deployment profile. And I called this dev. And now you get to choose between your different deployment environments. I'm going to choose a vCloud instance in this case. And then you can click on map details. So map details, this is your chance where you're going to map your logical template to your physical one and your logical networks to the physical ones. So within our catalog, there's already a mapping set up defining the logical to the physical template, so that came up first. There's only one physical template, but if you had multiple ones at this point, you could choose the one you wanted. And then under logical networks, I'm going to map our default one to this one. Now on the second step, there's application properties, and you get a chance here to override any of the properties that were defined that you're allowed to do so. So here's our contact app, that's our node. We'd have another chance if this was like a production profile to increase the memory or CPUs if we wanted the defaults in the blueprint to stay the same, and we consider this a special case. Here at the services are all the TC server properties that are available, and you could change any of these if you wanted to. In our case, they're all good. And then application component again, you have another chance to change the context name or the WAR file. Yeah, please.
At the VM level and maybe at the component level like TC server,
So you're asking if in TC server,
Or perhaps at the VM level, you have a handful of properties that you guys have put in, but I know that the VMs in themselves take other properties.
I think the VMs are locked down, but on your services you can go in the catalog and make your own or modify the existing ones. And the application components right now, you can't change the defaults, but in the blueprint you can add properties. Okay. Yes. I just meant you only get the CPU and the memory and things. You can create your own templates and upload them. So yeah, you have a lot of options for you know, creating your own templates and then modeling them in the catalog so they're available for usage. Okay. This is the execution plan. So this is the step-by-step flow. So we see the TC server runs the install script, then configure, then start, and then our contact web app, our WAR, runs its install script, and then that's the end of this process. This final step's our review page. So you can review the blueprint if you wanted to, and look at the execution plan again. We see our physical to logical mappings in the template and the network, and you get a chance to review all your properties one more time. And I'll click on deploy. Hopefully everything's good with the network. I'm mainly going to, I'll kick off these first couple ones for real, but I have existing applications we'll hit, and I have some videos that are time compressed that we can watch because this takes a while to run. Alright, so this is the same configuration deployment that's starting. So the deployment's scheduled up here. Now it's in progress. You can see that the IP address resolved and the VM still provisioning itself. At this point I typically go watch in the execution plan things running. You see that the VM did go green, and when we expand the execution plan, we'll see that TC server is already finished installing and just the contact web app installation is continuing. Also, for each script that ran, you can look at the script that actually got executed. You can look at the properties that were used at this time. They're dynamic and they can change at runtime between different steps, so you can verify exactly what ran with the script. And then viewing the virtual machine logs, this is all the output from your script that was run. So I mean, this is extremely useful for debugging without having to SSH into the different machines. And this deployment is now completely done and successful. Okay. So I'm going to go to the deployments page in the real application, and this is the one I kicked off. It's still running, and I will go into this. So we see this is the WDC, which is the vCloud instance I chose, same as this one. And I'm going to just grab the IP address for it. Alright, so this is a real simple application using Spring, and if I click on search, we'll see that this is just the in-memory database comes with 3 records, and these are the default ones. Okay. So let's move on to doing the EC2 deployment on this. So at this point, this is, you see our dev deployment profile that we just did. I can click on a new one here if I want to instead of going back through the blueprint. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'll call this one dev EC2. If I'd wanted to, I could have chosen an existing one. Alright, so I'll pick EC2 this time. And I'll click on map details. So now we're taking the exact same application, and we're going to be deploying it to a different environment without any changes to the blueprint. Once again, this takes a minute. You see the physical and logical template already mapped. There's just one choice, and it's querying EC2 for the network. Go ahead.
How does the blueprint map to EC2?
You mean like an actual EC2 instance as it's running?
Yeah.
That would be the actual like VM instances in the deployment.
Okay.
Is that?
Well, so I'm wondering, as I set up the blueprint, is there a way to specify that I want a particular, say I want an M1 medium instance?
No, so you don't. It's at the point in the well, it'd be you wouldn't do that in the blueprint. It'd be at the point where you go to deploy. So I think I have to go through the mappings again, but I think it's probably related to the templates. I'm not sure. If you want to check with me afterward, I can try and check with someone. Okay, in the logical network, I'm going to choose the public one, so it's accessible externally. And then I'll leave all these settings. Well, actually I need to override things. So I mentioned before you can override your services. So at this point I'm going to override a few values. So this global conf one's just some basic configuration settings around being able to get to Yum and other repos and things. And I'm using a no proxy one for EC2. And then I'm going to take this TC server package, and I didn't mention, so I'm changing the no proxy one, or the proxy one to a no proxy one for the global conf setting. For TC server, I'm actually pointing to all co-located instances of the binaries in S3. So there is actually a cloud tunnel that's set up between when you create a VPC that you use in EC2 with our product. You'd have a cloud tunnel set up on a VM, so that tunnels back to our server, and it'll proxy the application director server and our Rabbit messaging server that we use. So any content that's actually on the application director server, you will have that accessible, but any other binaries, maybe within your company, you won't be able to get to those. But I would say it's probably, for performance-wise, if you're doing a lot of EC2 deployments, it'd be better to put them on S3 regardless. Okay, so I just need to update this other one for the installer. And now on the application component, I'm going to do the same thing to point to a contact WAR that's on S3. Okay, and that's all we need to do here. The execution plan's the same. And we can see the physical template we chose, and the public network for the logical one, and also the S3 URLs that we picked. So again, I'll click on deploy. We'll go to a movie so we can watch it. Right, we can see here there's EC2 West is where we scheduled it, so we're in the EC2 West region. The IP address resolved. Let's try that. 50.1, so it's a public EC2 address. The VM is provisioning. This is all time compressed, by the way. It takes, maybe around 10 minutes for a deployment to run. So we see the TC server install starting, and I think it finishes really quickly once it gets going. EC2 seems to serve very fast from S3 and getting things installed. Okay, so I'm just showing, I think, the properties again that we see. We have the S3 ones that we did in the deployment profile that we overrode, as opposed to the default ones from the blueprint. Actually, I think, that's it for that one. So let me go ahead and I'll hit our EC2 app. This is the one that was already pre-deployed. Right, and once again we have the memory database with 3 different default people created in it, and that's it. So we had a same deployment from the same blueprint to EC2 and to vCloud, and all we had to do was override a few S3 properties for the binaries that it needed. Any questions? Okay. All right, let's move on. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure you're going to cover this. Let's see, do you support the changes deployment? For example, I have a couple of GSD pages changed. I want to define the running instances.
Yeah, I think so. He's asking if we support doing updates. That's towards the end of my talk. So let me keep going. Okay.
Before you go to the other one, do we support just now your previous slide? You were talking about skill out.
I'll be showing that. Maybe people can hold off a little bit till we get at least through this part. I've got a half an hour left, and I do have a lot. I'm going to try and cover. I do 2 more iterations of the contact app, and then we'll do updates and scale out. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to create our next version. Oh, so I may have gone too quickly. Let me click cancel. On our options here, on an existing application version, one is you do have this quick deploy feature. I'll just show that quickly. You can, if you haven't changed anything on your blueprint and things haven't changed, you can quickly pick a deployment profile and even do a quick override. So as I made a deployment profile to EC2, and so I could continually pick it and keep deploying without doing any special changes. If you just wanted to do a one-off deployment, you could have just done a quick deploy and overridden a couple of values to try it out and not necessarily saved it. And then the other option you have is copy, and you could also delete. So when you click on copy, you get a full copy of the application version in its blueprint. So we'll call this 1.5. The deployment profiles don't copy over. You need to make those again. So I'm going to call this with vPostgres. We click on save. And now when we go in, we get a starting point from our last application. So this is a good way if you're creating a new version and you do want to slowly build out your infrastructure and it's not too dissimilar, you can keep copying your last version, keep that around so you can keep deploying it, and now you'll have your new version also you can deploy and test with. So I am going to add a Red Hat 6.1 64-bit node, and I'll call this DB. And then I'm going to get Postgres. So this is vFabric Postgres 904. Now with that on, currently this only supports Red Hat, so that's why I'm using that, Red Hat 64-bit. When you're dropping these different services, you can optionally define what their supported OSs are, and that's in the catalog. Okay, and then I'm going to drop a SQL script onto this. And we'll call it create DB. Now I'm going to add some properties to it. I'll use my notes. So the first one we're making will be called CMD, and that's a reference to the pSQL command line, so I can execute my scripts. So if you click save, you would go back to the main screen, but you can keep adding more in a row by doing save and add another. And now I'm just going to have references to all the different scripts I need to run, and I'll talk about them in a second once I get them set up. Okay, I'll expand this and cover this just for a second so we can see them all. So we have our command type, which is a string, to pSQL again, and then we have create database, schema, and security schema, and they're each SQL files that we're going to execute. And the create database creates the default database and user. The schema is the app's main schema, and security schema is the default Spring Security distributed, schema for you doing JDBC authentication. So I kept that separate just since it's provided by Spring. So, I could have put that at the end of my schema SQL file, but I wanted to keep it separate even though that doesn't really change often. And I'm going to go ahead now and create a configure script to go with this. And we'll see I'm referencing the different variables. So the commands pSQL, I'm using the default Postgres user, and then -f, and I'm referencing each of the files, and since they're content, they'll have been downloaded for us, and I'm referencing the local copies of them. Alright, so I'll start modifying things. So I'm going to now draw our first dependency. So I'm going to say the contact app, web app, depends on the database. So by doing this, this is going to affect our execution plan when we look at it. And this is saying, so one thing, and Brian will demo this more, is, I mentioned when you draw a connection, you'll get that auto bind feature. And in this case, there's nothing that connected or we would have seen a message. But it also represents saying that the contact web app needs this to be completely done before it would start running. So you're guaranteeing that the contact web app's not going to try and start before not only Postgres is started, but that your create DB script is started and it can successfully connect to it. Alright, so the database is configured, we've drawn our dependency, and I'm going to add, and we have our WAR file and everything already configured. I'm going to add a couple new properties. So Postgres IP, we're going to want the IP address for writing out our JDBC URL to Postgres. And we saw string, we saw bind, and you can have default values coming from your services inside the catalog that you can change, and this is the blueprint value. And another option is you can bind to any other property available in the blueprint. So we're going to bind to the DB node's IP address. So DB IP. Now, when you do this, you do want to have dependencies, because anything that's dynamically generated, if you tried to reference like another IP address on a node and you weren't depending on it, you might run and get some bad values that were not ready yet before, if your VM finished before the other one's provisioned. So, this helps have everything run in the right order so you get dynamic properties correctly. And I'm going to add one more binding one. So I want the instancer to TC server. So that's going to be to our self. So that's the referencing the current node. Okay, so we have our instancer variable. So there's a lot of properties available, and it's not global that you can by default just get any of them. It's as you start doing a larger blueprint, it becomes overwhelming. So right now we have it that you have to explicitly do this bind reference to another variable. Okay, so I've added my instancer, which binds to self vFabric TC server instancer, and the Postgres IP, which binds to the DB IP node. And I'll just do a quick check here. Yeah. So I've got one more thing to do. I'm going to modify the WAR installation script a little bit. So in WAR, I'll click on Actions, and I'm going to modify the install. So right here above the service start, can everyone see this, by the way, or is it a little small? Okay. Zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I've added a few lines here, and I'll explain them. I could have added this in the configure lifecycle and done this myself, but the default WAR script already is starting and stopping the service, so there's no reason to really have it start by default in the HSQL mode, and then restart it again pointing to Postgres. So this is short-circuiting that part of the lifecycle by adding to the script. So the first thing I do is change to the instancer of the bin, and that's the TC server's particular instance that's being configured, the default one, and its bin directory. by changing it there when we call service start at the end, I have it configured in the Spring app that any contact *.properties files will be loaded. So I have in a property placeholder set up that loads some properties from the class path, and then it has that any properties files like contact *.properties that get loaded from where the server started, it'll override any class path ones. So we're taking the JDBC URL, which by default in the class path is pointing to HSQL, and we're creating our JDBC Postgres URL, and we're using our $Postgres IP address, so we're pointing to that, and we're using the default port, and I made a database called contact. You could have taken the port and the contact and made those properties too if you wanted things more configurable and feeding from your actual create DB script. But in this case it's just hard-coded for keeping the example simple. And then I'm just echoing contact app properties file, and you'd be able to see that in your logs then. And it's good to have different things like this. So besides your installations that may be automatically having output, you can put in things in your script like this so you can more easily tell where things might have failed as you're debugging. Then this next item here, I'm just doing a cat and appending to the default setenv.sh file for the instance. And I'm just adding some JVM ops, so I'm increasing the default max to 1024 megabytes, and I'm perm size to 256. And then here's the key Spring thing. For Catalina ops, I'm adding the default spring.profiles.active, and I'm setting our PostgreSQL to that. So, we're using the application context initializer feature. So by default, if it doesn't see anything set for Spring profiles.active, it goes ahead and just sets it to HSQL. Go ahead.
Question. What's the best practices to have this script here inline, or typically pull it from, say, subversion?
You mean as you're working on these things?
Yeah.
I'd say it depends what it is. If it's really part of specifically to your application and it's something like this, it's not going to change. I mean, you certainly could store it with the app. I mean, that's the same concept of having your services, stored in the application. Because if this did change between version 1.0 and 1.5, you could update it here. I'd say it's personal preference. If you have scripts that are larger or part of your testing, other testing, you certainly can keep them in version control and make them a content file, and then just call them and have have this sort of have these scripts delegate to your other possibly larger scripts. So whatever fits in with your process best. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I was just mentioning the context initializer, so that's it for this. Oops. Just checking my notes. Okay. All right, so this is complete. I'll click on deploy again. And I'm picking vCloud. All right, I'm going to walk through this quick because we're starting to run low on time, and I want to get to the Apache and the updates. So you can see here we have our so whereas we said in the blueprint that the contact web app depended on the create DB script, in this case the arrows are reversed because this is your actual sort of script execution flow. So we have Postgres install, the create DB configure script run, and then this will wait for that. And when you cross node boundaries, really installations wait in general right now, but we'll optimize that in the future. So then TC server will install and your contact web app, and then this app will be done. Okay, so I'll skip on clicking on deploy for this. but we'll save it. All right, this is yeah. Okay, so here's our two-tier app with Postgres, and we have our Red Hat 64-bit VM, and the IP addresses have resolved. Database one should finish in a minute. Yeah, and now we see that because we made oh, I think I forgot to do this in the blueprint, making it clustered, but in the other examples I made the TC server node into a clustered one, and then you'll see that if you do that and you just have one, which is the default, you'll have you'll see like how many of these nodes, and then you'll see each VM being provisioned in that one window. And so we see Postgres is already finished completing. Red Hat VM provisioning starts up a little faster in this case, it seems. And TC server should finish quickly. Yeah. Okay. And like I said, this is time compressed, but everything's complete on this now. Let me jump and show the app really quick. So here's our 1.5 application. Oops, didn't mean to go to this one. Sorry, skipped ahead. All right. So I'm going to get the IP address. And I'll do a search. So not that this proves it, but the HSQL DB had 3 default records. I have Postgres not have any because this is sort of moving towards production and we don't want to have test records in it. So let me create a couple of records, or at least I'll just create one myself. And then that's there. So let's move on quickly. We'll get to the Apache one, which will proxy this and we can look at it a little bit more. So I'll go back into our app, and I'm going to copy 1.5 again, and we'll add Apache in front of it. So this release I'll call 2.0. Alright, and I'm going to grab another CentOS 32-bit node, and I'll call this one Apache Proxy. And in this case, I'm going to add, I said I do network segregation, so I'm going to add another logical network. And so I'll leave our default network, logical network, which everything else is on, the way it is, and we'll map that to an internal private network, so we segregate TC server and the database. You won't be able to hit them, you know, even inside the company. They'll be on their own private network on vCloud. You'd have to SSH into Apache and then SSH into the rest of the IPs behind it. Okay. Apache had one value set, but I'm doing sort of a simpler example where I'm just going to write out my own proxy config. And also, this isn't the latest Brian's going to show, but the new vFabric web server, which is a vFabric Apache implementation, and the latest TC server scripts, they automatically, if you have a clustered Apache and clustered TC server and connect them, they'll do HTTP proxying by default and connect a number of things. So I'm just going to change this back to use the catalog value and clear it. And now I'm going to click on TC server, and I'm going to turn on AJP, and I'll use that as my proxy protocol in this case. Okay, so I've turned on AJP for both. Confirm this. Okay. And now on Apache, I'm going to create a static content script, because I mentioned, so the static content script will get the static content installed and get the proxy configuration for TC server and for the static content and TC server. So I just grabbed a script application component. I'm dropping that on. Right, I'm going to create a dependency now that the static content will wait till the web app's fully up. So when we do our proxy config, it can connect successfully. TC server and the web app will be completely up at this point. I've got a few properties I need to add. Okay, so I'm going to bind to the contact app IP. And instead of hard coding the context, I'm going to point to the contact web app context property where we set it before. And here I'm creating a reference to my static content file. So I want to set that to content again. And this is a zip with the static content, so I have the build in my app split apart. So the WAR has everything, and it also creates a static content zip. So when you're doing dev, everything's there from your WAR, and in this case, TC server will not pass through, for the static content, and I'll show that in the config. Alright, and here's where I'm going to get a reference to the static site. So this is where the default static site is from the script. Okay, so self Apache config static site, and one more property. I'm going to use the global conf that the other scripts do because I have to install unzip, which doesn't come on the template by default. Okay, I think that's everything. So we have our global comp set at content, we have config static site referencing the Apache config static site, we have static content going to the zip as content, and we have our context and TC server IP reference, which is on our contact app IP. Okay. So on the create static content, I'm going to create a configure script. So I'm just loading the global conf here. I'm installing unzip using yum. And so here I'm just creating in the httpd conf.d where you can do Apache config snippets, a proxy _ajp.conf. Since I sort of turned off all the default config around the the Apache script, I just want to do this myself. I'm loading the proxy AJP module, and here I create a proxy pass setting. In this case, I'm saying for the $context, the contact app, under the extjs directory where the JavaScript static app is, don't proxy with the bang. And then this is the proxy pass through for AJP, so then everything else going to /contact is going to go to the contact web app. And then otherwise underneath this, I just create the static directory that I'm going to unzip the content to, and I do that and I restart Apache so it picks up the config. Okay. Alright, this is all ready. I'm going to click on deploy. I just want to show the logical network, and then I'm going to jump to the videos, I think, not walk through. Well, I'll walk through to up to the plan page. I'm creating a new deployment profile. And I'm clicking on map details again, and we can see our 3 nodes here, and contact app and Apache proxy are to the CentOS one, and DB map to the Red Hat physical template. Sorry, this should come up in a second. Anyway, I'm waiting for it to come up, and we're going to see that we have two networks this time. We'll have the default logical one. Oh, shoot. All right, let me try one more time. This is the dangers of using the live network in the presentation. Well, if it doesn't come up this time, I'll move on. But so it's querying, it's getting the physical networks. I'll just show it when it looks like it's maybe going to fail again. But we'll have an external network, and that'll just show the Apache proxy node. Okay, all right. Well, we got through most of the demo. So we have an Apache proxy with the external network. And then Apache proxy is also on the default logical network with the database and the contact app with TC server. So all three of them, I would map those to a private network, and you would resolve, each one would get a private address, and then Apache proxy would get a public address also. So like I said, so they all three can see each other on the one private network, and then you can hit Apache from within the company. So, all right, so I can't continue with this. Let me just jump to the video. And you'll see again, I think when we watch it, what the execution plan looks like. Okay. All right, so we see these are I happen to know the 1.72 range is the private addresses. Those resolved, and Apache had 10 dot address and a 172 one. So now we're going to watch the rest of this from the execution plan, and you'll see there's a bug here with the arrows, but it's that database would run, then contact app, and then Apache proxy. Everything just completed successfully. Okay. I'm going to pull up a all right, I think I'm having network problems, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, well, I was going to show you that app coming up. I'm not going to be able to. I don't have the IP address handy. Let me, let's see, I guess let me just jump ahead to the video. I was going to show just pulling up the app and hitting it, and then logging into the JSP part, and then logging into the XTJS part, which would be the proxy, or the static part that would bypass the proxying. So we're actually running a little long on my time. I'm just going ahead and run the scale out video. So this is all recorded, so no trouble. Okay, so we chose the 1.5 version of the application. This one has a single node in clustered, and we're going to do a scale out. So we're going to call that scale out TC server. And we're going to increase this cluster size from 1 to 4. And then this is showing the flow again, and you saw there was a 1 to 4 on it for each of the nodes, or you may not, it was quick, but here we're just doing the confirmation, and we're going to size 4. We'll see everything again as it starts running on the execution plan details. So update scheduled, and we see our 2 existing nodes, and they kept their IP addresses. I think I'll highlight that. Yeah, so you can see, so the nodes that were already there don't get touched at all. We're just provisioning and adding to this already existing configuration. So these should finish quickly since this is time. So this is going to create 3 nodes that are exact same as this original installation. So they're going to all be pointing to the Postgres database. Okay. Could you wait till this is done and then ask? Sorry, Okay, the IP addresses had resolved. And you see the 3 different nodes on the execution plan. This one finished already, and then these other 2 are just finishing up. So you can watch it collapsed for overall progress for the cluster, or you can expand it and watch it like this. It's definitely useful for being able to expand it in case an individual node fails, and then you can, it's possible that you have network issues or something like that if, one script failed out of a few different nodes because they're all the same. Okay, I'm pulling up the contact app again. And I'm creating a couple of records in this one, so they're all pointing to the same Postgres database. For real, you'd want to put like a proxy in front of these different TC servers. I'm just keeping this a little bit simpler. And now I'm getting another IP address from the 3rd node. I'm just logging in again, so we'll see we created 2 records in the other Tomcat, and now we'll see them here, and we'll go ahead and create 1 more, and then we'll jump back to the other instance, so we'll see we're pointing to the same database. And now we're back on the other Tomcat one. Okay. I can pause this for a second, but I'm sorry, what was your question now? This was the scale out part. Updates next.
Basically, if you have a group of TC server instances,
Yes.
and you want to add, let's say, go from 2 to 4,
Yes.
you can obviously add 2 more to the cluster. But you can have a web server that has a list of all those nodes. You have to update I think it's going to dot a non-JK or whatever that proxy file is. Will it do that as well?
Well, so we have it. So you'll see update running next. So there's sort of 2 steps you can do now. One is scale out, which basically does the initial provisioning step for you and gets that in place. If you wanted to, you could have modified, well, you would have had to have modified the app, which I don't think you could do for the scale out part because everything's sort of cached, but you probably want to scale out, get things provisioned, and then update at this point. It's property dependent, so you'll get a chance to change properties. So if you would change like let's see, like if I would change the context on TC server, like from contact to SpringOne contact, or something like that, and you had your Apache proxies or something else, depending on that, update would run for for the TC server and the web app, and it would also run for the Apache stuff. So it sort of looks at what properties have changed, and then if anything's directly related to them, and then the update will get run on each of these. So let me run this, and it might make a little more sense when you get to see it go. But this applies sort of global changes to multiple, parts of the app. So I made like a version 2.0, and it's just going to change the title of the web app. Under the application component, I'm just getting the URL to my 2.0 WAR. So we changed it from contact.war to contact20.war. And then we're making a small change in the update script. We're not quite final on the release, so this hopefully should get fixed by then. There's a small scripting issue in the default WAR update. So this is showing I'm changing to the instance dir, so when it starts up again, we'll pick up our contact app.properties file, and then I'm removing the existing one since, you know, if you update just a WAR file and there's an expanded web app, TC server, Tomcat doesn't automatically remove that for you. A more advanced example would do a hot deploy instead of just copying the WAR over. Okay, so now we see that, you know, out of the blueprint, just the contact web app update is running. And this is our execution plan for updates. And we see we changed one value, the contact, to a WAR. And we can go ahead and click on update. So now once again you can expand it. You can see all four of these nodes for the contact web app getting the update script run on them. So right now the update's scheduled, it's in progress, and they're all complete, and we have success for our update. Now if we go back to the contact app, you see the title is contact. And I'm clicking on search, and it reloads, and it's contact app SpringOne 2012. And I'm just going to hit the other one to show it ran on all the nodes. Okay. Yes, please.
You're saying it currently doesn't support the scale-in features, right?
This release does not support scale-in. It's
I'm going to go back and shut down two of the machines. What's going to happen? I'm going to reflecting on the page. Or
you won't be able to do that in Application Director right now. It's something we wanted to fit in. It was just time constraints. I'm sure it'll be in the next release. Yeah, please. Did that answer your question? You really, I mean, you could.
go back to shut down the virtual machine. I can do that. So the app director will not be able to capture
Yes, if you do need to do scale-in right now, you can go to the cloud provider and get rid of a couple instances, and you can manually update the config, but you won't be able to really work seamlessly out of Application Director right now once you've decreased the number of nodes. Okay. Yes?
On the update script,
Sure.
it went by pretty quick. Is
Okay.
that a completely user-created script, or is that something that fits with every component
So,
in the library, and then it's a sub in the
some of them have it. That was the WAR's update script, and I modified it just a little bit because it actually is a ticket I filed to get that fixed. But some things will have update now, and we'll keep building that up. But it's something that you can completely customize. So, like for that WAR update, you could completely delete it and do whatever you want. Or you could get rid of it and drop the script onto. So for like any of the application components, you can completely clear out the update and make it do whatever you want. I mean, the main goal is to have the flexibility so you can change the scripts to what you need, because it's going to be very specific probably for what sort of reliability around configuration, and you might want your update script to call into F5 or something and update a load balancer. Yes?
When you scaled out to 4 servers, if you had like a proxy like Apache on the front of that, could you schedule the update of that to add the additional nodes with that, or do you have to do that after the scale out as an update independently? Is that?
You mean so like once you've scaled out? Right. I think right now the scale out just adds the nodes, and then you would run an update to update your like proxy configurations or things like that. Okay. Yes, actually. Well,
At the beginning of the session, you mentioned some options to do updates. Does that mean that the vFabric vFabric application director can manage, for example, applying patches to the already running vFabric?
Yeah, so this update that you did, if you had if you have things set up that your service supports an update, and you can supply a property value to indicate that it changed, you can trigger anything that you can script really to run.
No, I was more meaning
Oh.
how about the operating system security patches?
Well, that's what I meant. As long as it's a script that you can run,
All right.
really, it's fine. I don't. You'd have to talk to some people that do POC stuff. I'm not sure if it requires reboots and how it syncs up with everything like that. But certainly, if it's something that doesn't require reboot, I'm sure it would work. And there's probably a workaround for reboots.
So from what I understand, once all this setup is running, basically I have just a traditional virtual machine that I have control of it.
You mean once it's provisioned? Yeah, absolutely. If this was something to get you started, but our goal is that we help you manage it going forward. So like if you do start looking in this and you see gaps, you should try and give us feedback. But if we could just hold off on questions for now, because Brian's got a segment, and then we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end. I think so. Let me just see if it's up. Yeah, I think everything came back up.
Great. Thanks, David. So the next application we're going to deploy with the application director is SpringTrader, and this is a reference application that we built at VMware, taking Spring Source, the open source framework, and deploying it across using our commercial products, deploying on those runtimes, and deploying it in a cloud environment, vCloud, as well as EC2 through Application Director. The reference application is loosely based on DayTrader, the IBM DayTrader application, which is basically a web-based trading application that allows you to create an account, view your portfolio, and place trades. The difference is SpringTrader supports multiple form factors, browser, tablet, or in mobile devices. It uses REST-based services and a low-latency SQL data grid. So we'll show you that. But all the source code is available. You can go out there on GitHub. It was released this week. GitHub.com, vFabric/SpringTrader. You can clone that repository. And by the end of the year, we'll have all the blueprints that we've been working on, and I'll show you some of the work that's been going on. But you can get the Spring app out there today. There's a getting started guide out in the GitHub wiki. So at a high level, basically, it's a single-page interface that runs within the browser. It communicates to application services via HTTP and REST-based services. But when you place a trade, it puts that trade onto Rabbit and processes that asynchronous transaction with the integration services. So we've separated the REST-based services, the application services, from the integration services. You'll see in the deployment, I'm going to combine those on a single TC server, but the idea is that you should be able to separate those as a best practice and scale application services separate from your integration services. And both of those services communicate with the data tier. In this case, it's the SQL-fired data grid. So let me just give you a quick functional overview. Fingers crossed on this. There we go. So you can actually hit this with your mobile device, iPad. There is a optimized view for each of those devices or desktop. This is now what's deployed out here. It's called SpringTrader. It was previously called Nanotrader. There's been a name change, so this deployment hasn't been updated yet, but the code in GitHub reflects SpringTrader. just in case there's any confusion on the branding. So you can see here, this is the landing page. It's a dashboard. It has account summary, some user statistics. And this is very similar to DayTrader functionally. If you look at DayTrader, architecturally it's quite different. But portfolio overview, you can see number of holdings, asset distribution, and you can also sell off those holdings here. And you can place trades. So this buy order will get processed asynchronously. So this call just basically went through those application services. The application services put the message on the RabbitMQ. The integration services picked up that buy order. And you can see this was processed today. So there it is. So anyway, I just want to kind of give you a quick context for what we're about to deploy and build. So that is the SpringTrader, formerly known as Nanotrader. And the URL's in here, so feel free to hit it after the get out of the session. So basically what we're going to build here in Application Director is we have the user interface, which is HTML5, CSS3 with jQuery, Bootstrap, and Backbone. We want to deploy that on vFabric Web Server or Apache Server. So vFabric Web Server is our first service that we're going to be using through the Application Director catalog. Then we have the application services, which is a Tomcat server instance, the message broker, which is RabbitMQ, and SQL Fire. So we basically have 4 services here. The integration services also run on TC server, so web server, TC server, Rabbit, and SQL Fire. So one of the new feature in Application Director 5.0 that we're going to take heavy advantage of here is the auto bind feature. So basically we want to rapidly deploy an application. We want to make it so you can just bring your app and your app artifacts, and all this plumbing is kind of hidden from the user of Application Director or the user of these services. So if we look at all the properties in the Application Director catalog for all these products or to deploy SpringTrader, there are 89 properties that are available or exposed from these services. That's quite a few properties, and obviously you don't want to be keying in 89 properties. That wouldn't be very productive. So if you're opinionated on what these services are in your catalog, so you can make them very generic or you can refine what those services are, the more you refine them with an eye for reuse, then you can start taking advantage of auto-bind and auto-bind middleware together, auto-bind properties into your application context. So, and you can also default some of them. So there's 39 of these properties we're going to default in this blueprint. So these are 39 properties nobody has to touch. We're going to auto bind as well as auto compute. Some properties can be computed from other properties. We're going to 41 of those properties. So that's an additional 41 that you don't have to type in. So these can be automatically wired through the blueprint. So that basically leaves you with you bring your own app. 9 properties, 9 configuration properties that you have to fill in. So the static content for the URL. So the Apache web server, CSS, HTML5, all that stuff. Nothing you can do about that. That's part of the app. You're going to bring that. We got a WAR. That's where we're going to download the WAR file of the deployment. We actually have 2 WARs: DB username and password, schema, and the database load script. So only 9 properties in this blueprint we're actually going to have to fill in. So let's jump right to that. How am I doing on time? I got 10 minutes to build this? All right. So this is SpringTrader. Create a new application. We're going to create a new application version. And then we're going to create a blueprint. So we're going to drag some operating systems out here. Oops. And 4. Okay. Line those up for your viewing pleasure. All right, so we have basically all the systems we need here. So we're going to, let's grab a vFabric web server here. We're going to drop, you can see one property was automatically bound as soon as we dropped that OS on the web server onto the OS.
Yeah, there are some defaults available automatically on the node. The IP addresses, the node array number again, and the host name.
So what vFabric web server is going to actually be load balancing requests to the RESTful services. So I'm working left to right here. We want a cluster of TC servers. I'm going to bring a RabbitMQ and the SQLfire data grid. So with SQLfire, there's a locator, which is going to load balance to the SQLfire servers. So you can think of that. It also keeps track of the membership of the SQLfire cluster. So basically, I'm going to basically stay focused on the TC server and the Spring application and the properties that need to make it in there. So we need to set up the Jindy data source inside the server XML. We also need to, there's a property placeholder in the application for the Rabbit host and port. So we also need to plumb those into the WAR file, into the application. So the last two pieces I need here is the WAR file. So once again, you can see properties are auto-connecting here. So I'm just going to call this is the integration WAR file. This is the application services WAR file. Okay, so with this, we're going to start to create these dependencies, which is going to connect all these properties. So vFabric web server is going to depend on TC server. So that 6 properties now are set. We're going to have, we wanted those Rabbit properties to be plumbed into the application context, into those property placeholders. So we're going to drag this, and we should have 2 properties. That's the host and port now are set, are available. Now, traditionally, these are all the properties you'd have in external property files. Your middleware team and developers may have separate sets of properties. This is all dynamic. So these are properties you don't have to carry around with you. So we also, as I mentioned, we need to know the locator. Our JDBC URL will point to this locator. So we have a dependency here on the locator. Oops. More properties were auto-bound, and SQLfire servers also have a dependency on the locators. We also don't want the app to start up until the SQLfire servers all the way to the right are available, since that's where the data resides. So we're going to draw a dependency here to SQLfire. More properties. So at this point, we basically have
It's open.
It's open.
Yeah.
So we're basically left with these properties here, which is, you know, the Apache URL for the content, the static content. So we go in here, properties. This deployment archive. Okay.
Brian, you pasted these in manually. Could these actually be pulled from the source code repository?
Yeah, you can pull these from any URL. If you had a strong naming convention, for example, and these were all hosted, let's say your WAR file was in a Maven repository, and you could actually use the context, the application context name, and actually use that to go fetch your WAR. You'd have to have some kind of convention, but those are the things, as you're building services for your enterprise, you'll have your own opinions on what those things look like. If there are strong conventions, you can automate that through the scripting and pull those down. All right. So what I'm going to do is, instead of copy and pasting all these URLs as you guys are watching, basically all I have to add at this point, everything's been auto-wired. The database username and password, I'm going to take a look at the Tomcat scripts and actually how we get those properties into the Spring application context, those property placeholders. Unless you guys want to see me copy those URLs. So.
Ryan, you might want to mention the DBCP versus the TC server.
Oh yes, yeah, I'll show that. So on the installation piece, we're basically these scripts, these out-of-the-box scripts, which are coming with the Application Director 2.0. These will point to they're basically bringing down the RPMs, installing the RPMs, accepting the end-user license agreement. So I think more interesting is these configure scripts that we have. Let me see here. So I'm going fast, so if you want to catch me afterwards too, we can talk a little more about this. So let me zoom out. Okay. Okay, so basically those properties that were auto-wired to the TC instance, I mentioned we need to get the database information. So Spring TC Server has basically a templating system where you can pass properties into. So we're leveraging one of the vFabric TC Server value-added features, templating. You'll see we're basically going to pull down the template from a URL, and you can have templates that are application specific or more generic, like you want to enable a Spring Insight, for example. So those templates are available, and you can pass a list of those templates in, and those will append configuration to the TC server configuration files. So this starts off basically reading some of those properties. The script, I think right here where we actually create the instance of TC server, you can see. Just get down to the TC server create instance command, which is, in this case, we're not using AJP, but we do support mod proxy AJP and mod proxy HTTP. You can see here we actually create a new instance name with an instance directory, and we pass in those auto-bound the ports, DB user, DB password, and the JDBC URL. Those are all created down in the SQL Fire server and auto-bound into this context, and those are just going to be injected through this, and basically this template will actually write those to the server XML. Then the last piece we also do, and that supports the Tomcat connection pooling. If you have DBCP, there's also hooks in here to write it to the Catalina properties, so you can use a property placeholder to use the database commons pool. You can see this here, and that's actually, if you see this script, these are here too, because we are supporting with these services legacy sample applications in Application Director, as well as the SpringTrader app. So we didn't want to have two services in here, but a little bit of history on that. And then the last piece is those Rabbit properties we said had to make it to the application context. Nano Rabbit host and the node port. We're writing those to the Catalina properties. We found that's under some circumstances, this is the best place to put it. So Catalina properties, they're visible. It's easy to set this up in STS versus try to set all these JVM arguments. There are reasons why you might not want to do this, but this was like the most universal way to kind of set these properties, easily make them available in the application context in a Spring app across Windows, Linux, and as well as STS deployments. And so that's basically how you get the properties, the Catalina properties. Once we start up, those are available. Spring 3.1 will pick those Java properties and system properties up by default now, so in the new unified property management. So it's 10 o'clock. So that was the SpringTrader deployed, built within 10 minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, thanks for everyone for coming. There's a vFabric booth, and there's also a lounge. If you go to the lounge, there's actually an Application Director instance that you can talk to some of the people there, and if you want to try something out a little bit, I think they can help you with that. In the PDF for this for the presentations online, it's got some links to Application Director. Like I said, the newest version that we were demoing is out Q4, so sometime within the next few months or a couple months. And there's links to SpringTrader. the Spring Contact app on GitHub, and we've got some Twitter information for Brian and myself. And also, if you're interested, you can subscribe. There's vFabric and Rabbit, and a lot of the vFabric products have availability too. So thanks, everyone.